The work submitted for review today is a theological article arguing that what we're seeing in the news, the Euphrates River drying up, military powers rising in the East, are direct fulfillments of biblical prophecy.
Yeah, from Revelation and Matthew 24. It's heavy stuff.
It is. It's dealing with the end of the world, global war, the return of Christ. So let's just get right into the feedback.
Let's dive in. This kind of writing, it carries a lot of weight, you know? It's dealing with people's deepest hopes and fears.
It really does. And you can feel the urgency in this draft. The author is looking at the news and connecting the dots. But here's the first major hurdle: credibility. The argument linking the drying Euphrates to a modern military invasion needs to better anticipate and, I think, neutralize the historical counterarguments.
That is the crux of the issue right out of the gate.
Yeah.
The manuscript just asserts pretty confidently that the drying of the Euphrates in Revelation and this massive army of 200 million are definitely about modern ecological shifts.
Right. It points to dams in Turkey, the water crisis in Syria, and says, see, it's happening right now.
Which is a compelling image. You can't deny that. When you see a river that's flowed for millennia turn to mud, it feels apocalyptic.
It absolutely does. But here's the problem.
The draft completely ignores the preterist view.
Okay, so let's pause there for the listener. What exactly is preterism, and why does ignoring it hurt the piece?
Sure. So preterism is a view in eschatology, the study of end times, that argues most of the prophecies in Revelation were fulfilled back in the 1st century.
Around the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD.
Exactly. So a preterist looks at the kings of the East and says, that's not China in 2025. That was the Parthian Empire in the year 60.
And that's a strong historical argument.
It's a very strong argument. To John's original audience, the Euphrates River was the border. And on the other side, it was the Parthians. They were the boogeyman of the ancient world.
The one force Rome couldn't really conquer.
Right. They had mounted archers, they were terrifying, and they were literally east of the river.
So by just skipping over that, the author falls into what we call newspaper exegesis.
That's the term. Just reading the morning headlines into an ancient text. And it weakens the authority of the whole piece, because a skeptical reader, or even just a well-read believer, is going to think the author either doesn't know the history or is, afraid of it.
I can see that. It feels speculative instead of grounded. So how do they fix this? We don't want them to drop their argument.
No, not at all. The suggestion is to strengthen the futurist position, the idea that this is still to come, by actually using the historical interpretation. Call it a shadow.
A shadow?
Or a type, yeah. You argue that the Parthian threat was a localized fulfillment, a shadow of the ultimate reality. The prophecy demands something bigger. You don't ignore the history, you stand on it.
Okay, so let's get practical. The draft mentions the 200 million man army. How does the author use the history to prove the modern-day point?
This is where you use the math, and frankly, this is the strongest point the author is completely missing right now.
Okay.
The manuscript needs to cite the specific Greek text, myriads of myriads. It's translated as 200 million.
Which is a huge number even today.
It is, but in the 1st century, it was impossible. The entire global population was maybe 300 million people. That's everyone. Women, children, people in the Americas, everyone.
So you couldn't feel the 200 million man army. It's 2/3 of the planet.
Exactly. It is logistically, mathematically impossible for that to have been literally fulfilled by the Parthians. So the argument becomes, if you take the text literally, a 1st century fulfillment is impossible. Therefore, it must be future.
It has to involve a time when the world population can actually support an army that size.
Precisely. Which leads you directly to modern nations like China or India. Now you're not just guessing, you're arguing from necessity. That's a much stronger foundation.
That's a great pivot. Okay, staying with the river for a second. The draft talks a lot about the environmental side of it.
It does, but it's framed mostly as a climate change thing.
But in the scripture, the drying of the Euphrates isn't really about irrigation, is it?
No, it's about strategy. It was a massive defensive barrier for the Roman Empire. The prophecy says it dries up to prepare the way for the kings from the east.
It's removing a barrier.
Correct. So the author should frame the current environmental drying not just as a climate tragedy, but as the paving of a highway. It's removing the speed bump for Armageddon. That makes the argument robust, not just reactionary.
That makes a ton of sense. Okay, let's move to the second big issue, and this is one that plagues almost everyone writing about this topic, the time texts.
Ah, yes. Words like soon, near, quickly.
So the draft defends the 2,000-year delay by quoting 2 Peter 3:8. You know the one. A day is like 1,000 years.
It's intellectually lazy, and for critics, it can feel like theological gaslighting.
Gaslighting. That's a strong word.
Well, think about it. If I tell you I'm coming over soon, and I show up 20 years later and say, well, to me, 20 years is like a second, you'd be annoyed, right?
I would.
You'd say I twisted the word soon. If words can mean anything, they mean nothing. And that argument doesn't really comfort people who are looking for real signs. It makes every crisis in every generation feel potentially irrelevant.
So what's the fix? We can't change the text.
No, but we can change the analogy we use to understand it. The suggestion is to replace the abstract God is timeless defense with the birth pangs analogy from Matthew 24.
All these are the beginning of birth pains.
Exactly. And it's a superior analogy because it honors the process of time. Labor pains aren't constant.
Right. You have false labor, Braxton Hicks.
Exactly. You have contractions that start and they stop. They vary in intensity, but they aren't meaningless. They're preparing the body. So you can argue that past crises, World War II, the Holocaust, were false labor. Painful, real, terrifying, but not the delivery.
And a transition?
The transition is when the contractions get rhythmic, closer, undeniable. The author wants to argue that the convergence of signs now, the Euphrates, the global tech, Israel's statehood, is the transition to active labor.
I really like that. It validates history. It doesn't say World War II wasn't a sign. It says it was a contraction, but now we're in the delivery room.
Right. And you can reframe the delay as the patience of God. In Revelation 6, the martyrs under the altar ask how long. They aren't told time doesn't exist. They're told to wait a little while longer.
It reframes the delay as divine mercy, not a prophetic error. God isn't late, he's waiting.
Precisely. It turns the delay into a feature of God's character, not a bug in the prophecy.
Okay, let's shift to the signs themselves. The draft focuses very heavily on the scary stuff.
It's very heavy on the doom.
The doomsday clock, nuclear threats, wars and rumors of wars. It paints this picture of a world just spiraling down the drain.
Which, to be fair, is happening. But the problem is the piece treats those as the definitive signs. And Jesus explicitly said in Matthew 24 that wars and rumors of wars are not yet the end.
See that you are not alarmed, he says.
Exactly. He says such things must happen, but the end is still to come. By only focusing on the chaos, the piece misses the most measurable, linear sign of the end times.
The linear sign?
Think about it. Wars are cyclical. Nations rise, they fall. Earthquakes happen, then they stop. But there's one sign that's linear. It starts at 0 and goes to 100%.
The gospel.
Matthew 24:14. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world, and then the end will come. That's the pivot the author needs.
That completely changes the tone, doesn't it? Instead of just watching the news for a bomb to drop, you're looking for a mission to be completed.
It offers a hopeful, actionable metric. And this is where the author can get really creative with technology.
The draft right now connects tech mostly to the mark of the beast and surveillance.
Which is the standard trope. But what if we flip that? We have the internet. We have satellites beaming data into closed nations. We have AI that can translate the Bible into obscure dialects in seconds.
So the tech isn't just building the Antichrist's infrastructure, it's building the kingdom's infrastructure.
Exactly. Argue that the acceleration of the end times isn't just about how fast we can destroy the world, but how fast we're completing the Great Commission.
That gives the listener agency. You're not a victim of the times, you're a participant.
It shifts the tone from surviving the apocalypse to finishing the job. That is infinitely more encouraging.
And that leads perfectly to our final critique, which is about the overall purpose. The ultimate goal needs to pivot from this fear-based speculation to a theology of hope.
Right now, the tone mirrors the anxiety of the doomsday clock. It's focused on extinction, tribulation. But if you stop there, you miss the entire point of the book.
The book is called Revelation, the unveiling.
The unveiling of Jesus Christ, not the unveiling of World War III. Right now, the reader is left feeling anxious about that billion-man army, thinking we're doomed.
So how do you stick the landing? How does the author conclude this without being dismissive of the scary reality?
Reorient the conclusion to focus on the grand reversal. Frame the drying Euphrates and the rising armies not as signs of doom, but as the demolition crew.
The demolition crew. I like that. Unpack it.
Well, before you can build a beautiful new skyscraper, you have to tear down the old, condemned building. And it's loud, it's messy, there's dust everywhere. It looks like total chaos.
But if you know the blueprints,
Exactly. If you know the blueprints, you know the demolition is purposeful. It's clearing the site for the New Jerusalem. The author needs to frame these scary events as the necessary clearing of the board.
that is such a helpful visual. The chaos isn't the point, the construction is the point.
Right. And you end with Revelation 21. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, and there was no longer any sea. The sea in the ancient world was chaos, so the new creation is the removal of that chaos.
So practically, the author should end the article with the image of the city descending, not the army marching.
Yes. Don't leave the reader in the Battle of Armageddon. Take them through the battle to the marriage supper of the Lamb. Frame the signs as the answer to the prayers of the saints under the altar. The judgments aren't God losing control. They're God answering prayers for justice.
That completely changes the aftertaste of the article. It moves it from like a conspiracy blog post to a theological encouragement.
It empowers the reader. Instead of fear, they have anticipation. Look up, for your redemption draws near. That is the note you have to hit.
I think we've covered a lot here. Let's try to summarize this for the author, just a clear checklist for the rewrite.
Sure. First, deal with the history. Don't ignore the Parthians. Use them as the shadow. Then use the math to prove the literal fulfillment has to be modern.
Second, fix the timeline. Ditch the God is outside of time argument. Use the birth pangs analogy. It explains the long wait and validates the current intensity.
Third, balance the signs. Don't just focus on the scary stuff. Pivot to the positive, linear sign of the global gospel, and use tech as a tool for that mission.
And finally, change the destination. Don't end on the fear of the tribulation. End on the hope of the New Jerusalem. Frame the chaos as the demolition crew clearing the way for the king.
If the author makes those changes, this piece goes from being a scary observation to a really robust, hopeful declaration.
And that is something the faithful actually need right now.
Absolutely. We don't need more fear, we have the news for that. We need hope.
Was said. We invite the listener to revise the manuscript with these lenses, especially the birth pangs and the demolition crew, and submit it again for further review. We'd love to see the next draft. Thanks for listening to The Critique.